From the Battery Street studios of KCBS Radio in San Francisco, I'm Matt Pitman, and this is Bay Current for Thursday, December 2nd. Yesterday, we learned the first confirmed case of the Omicron variant of COVID in the United States was discovered right here in the Bay Area, where a San Francisco resident returned from South Africa on November 22nd and tested positive 3 days later. My KCBS Radio colleague Kathy Novak attended a quickly arranged press conference at City Hall yesterday where Mayor London Breed and the city's top health officials addressed this news. But first I asked Kathy if she'd share her own very recent personal experience about a friend of hers traveling back home to the United States from South Africa just last weekend.
As an example of how quickly things change, as you're saying, and how information ebbs and flows, a friend of mine got married recently, and that was already a year postponement for the wedding itself. And she'd put on her, and she'd put off her honeymoon. She said at last count 6 times she'd rescheduled it because they were going on their dream safari to South Africa. And at the time,
No way.
Yeah. And remember when we were talking about the South African variant before any of this. So she kept putting it off and going back and forth with the travel agents and this and that. And, you know, she said it was a really difficult decision whether or not to go. But finally, they decided to go places that were distanced, and safaris are outdoors and it's kind of camping setup, that sort of thing. And they had gotten their boosters. So they're like, we're going on our dream safari. Finally,
Right.
The day that they were flying back from Cape Town Airport was the day that we heard the news about this new variant being identified in South Africa. And I just woke up to this text that said, hey, there's a bunch of people in the airport who are crying because like all the flights to London have been canceled. And then the next I heard from her, it was hours and hours and hours later because she was already on the plane. But that's how she found out.
Oh, my goodness. So did they fly direct, or did they have to connect through a European stop?
They connected through Dubai. And actually, the person who boarded the plane ahead of her, she said, turned to her and said, aren't we lucky we're the last flight out of South Africa to Dubai? And she lives in New Jersey. She was my college roommate. And she said, you know, she's super conscientious. Like, we had been talking the entire time because I'm a reporter. So she always calls me for any extra information that she can't find on the CDC website. And had been going on about, you know, do I still go ahead with the wedding? And they had decided to make everyone test. And she got rapid tests for everyone. So incidentally, she had a stockpile left over from the wedding of rapid tests. And they've been using them every day since getting home. But one thing she did say was when she got back, she hopped on the CDC website. And that's when she was calling me again saying, what am I supposed to do? Because there was a lot of information around non-citizens not being able to come, that this travel ban went into effect on Monday. They're not going to stop American citizens coming back. So she could come back. And also she got in earlier than when the travel ban actually took effect on Monday. But it didn't seem super clear to her about, you know, just is she supposed to isolate? Was she supposed to get tested? Was she supposed to tell someone she had been in South Africa? So she's being super conscientious and testing regularly with those stockpile that she has and isolating. But that flow of information was a bit slow too.
So, Kathy, what do we know about this first case? Do we know anything about this individual?
We know the person traveled to South Africa. They got back to San Francisco on November the 22nd, and it wasn't until 3 days later that they started feeling sick. So at that point, we're up to November 25th. They got tested, and they reported their results, which were positive, and their travel history to the Department of Public Health. So what that means is that some extra screening kicked in because of that travel history. And part of what you're referring to there, Matt, with it being in San Francisco, some of the reason behind why it was detected here first may very well be because of that screening. Experts at UCSF and the testing company Color worked very quickly to sequence the sample to confirm that it was Omicron. We're told by Color that it took less than 30 hours from the time this person was tested to actually getting that confirmation. And, you know, it's more than your average COVID test, positive or negative. They have to do a lot more sequencing and work to figure out exactly what variant it was. And then that's what happened here.
So how is the city reacting? As I mentioned, you were at the press conference today. What is the response?
The response from our public health director, Dr. Grant Colfax, is to do what you should have been doing yesterday, basically, or any of the days leading up to this, that this is a time to be concerned, yes, but not to panic, and that at this stage, he does not expect that the city will change any of the restrictions around masking and vaccinations that are already in place, because it already has had stricter restrictions than many other places around the United States, including, requiring proof of vaccination to go inside restaurants and bars, that sort of thing. So that all stays. What we heard from Mayor London Breed was that the presence of Omicron in the world is likely to slow down any plans to pull back those restrictions, but we're not expecting right now any new restrictions to come into play. So what they're saying is, if you haven't gotten vaccinated, really now is the time, get vaccinated. Yeah. But also if you're eligible, get a booster, and, where it is required, indoors in certain settings, wear your mask, do all the things that you should already be doing.
We are in the holiday season. We're all inside a lot more together. I'm surprised, or maybe I've just missed it, that public health officials aren't being more aggressive with the health and safety protocols, given that we are in that period of time of the year where we're indoors and we're all gathered together, unmasked a lot more.
If I were to guess, I think some of it may be to do with the fact that what we hear from the health experts is that we all kind of have to sit tight, that this was only recently identified first in South Africa, but then as we know, it had already existed in Europe. It was just the South Africans had such good testing, setups that they found it first, as we talked about here in the Bay Area. So it will take some time for this to flow through to the place that we know, as we've been discussing, how well the vaccines work, how transmissible it really is, whether it actually makes people more sick. It can be more transmissible, but then actually once people get it, it's possible that it won't make them as sick. These are questions that are still out there that the health experts and health officials need to answer. And in the meantime, they're not going to, it seems, apart from the travel bans that we saw nationally, make any of these big moves to throw down more restrictions here, at least in San Francisco and around the Bay Area. And in fact, I don't think you did miss it, Matt. At the very end of Dr. Colfax's remarks, he kind of went through all of the details of the person, what they know, the repeated message to get vaccinated, get boosted, wear your mask, etc. But right at the end, he said, and we've been through about almost 2 years of this. Go enjoy being with your family. So it actually was this message that it's like, you can gather safely, but it's such a, bold underline under safely, that sure, you can do that if you got your booster and did all these things that we keep talking about. Hey, that might change if we find out more about this variant. But as you and I are talking here today with the information that's available right now, we're being told to just keep on keeping on, really. Yeah. But we may see more travel restrictions on coming into the country if some of your travel plans around the holidays were to go overseas, because at the time of all of this happening, the travel restrictions for anyone coming into the United States remained that you need to have a negative test within 72 hours of coming back into the U.S. And, as we've been discussing, this person got home and then only got sick 3 days later. So I think look out for that kind of timeline to likely be tightened up.
Bottom line, stay tuned.
And get your booster.
And get your booster shots, please. Kathy Novak, thank you as always.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks to my KCBS Radio colleague, Kathy Novak, and we have all the very latest on our website, kcbsradio.com. If you've enjoyed listening to Bay Current, we thank you, and we ask you to subscribe on the Odyssey app, Apple or Google Podcasts, or just about anywhere you listen. And every episode is on the KCBS Radio YouTube page. There's a link in our show notes. That's it for today's Bay Current. I'm Matt Pitman. We will chat with you again tomorrow.